Hello and welcome to Growing Tech Fast, the condensed Org3D podcast where we talk about growing tech startups with those who have grown them. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Emre Koksal, the founder of Datanchor. This is a unique and expanding startup in the data security space. Emre, it's such a pleasure to have you on our podcast today. How's it going?
Great, that pleasure is mine. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Well, look, for the sort of purpose of our listeners, Emre, I'd love to start off. If you could just sort of give me a brief introduction into who you are, kind of what your mission is, and the work that you're doing at the moment.
Sure, absolutely. So I was born in Ankara, Turkey. That was my hometown for 20 years. And after college, I moved to Boston for graduate school for PhD at MIT, where I spent 6 years plus some more for further research there. I couldn't have enough. So after that, I moved to Switzerland for around 18 months or so. And then I finally made my move to Columbus, Ohio, as a professor of electrical and computer engineering at Ohio State University. Always been interested in, entrepreneurship and building stuff. My passion is building simple technologies for difficult problems. Obviously, easier said than done. So it's not like I come up with one every other week. I mean, it's a difficult task. So, but I love it when I have one. And for Anchor, I wanted to do it, as a company myself, rather than just phasing out the technology to somebody else to take it, because for a variety of reasons, including it being, addressing, as you have said, an extremely large market with the very need. It's the right time. It's a blue ocean approach, but it's the right time. And, I was super excited to build it myself as a founder. Before that, I was, when I was at MIT, I was involved in Sycamore Networks, an optical, switching startup. That was very exciting as well. That kind of triggered my desire to build it on my own. And even at Ohio State University, I did build other technologies for other companies, like local and global companies. I have two kids, one 8, another 13, 2 daughters. That's basically between work and, the kids, their activities, that's kind of full-time.
Yeah, sounds it. So you're a professor, a startup founder and leader, and the dad of 2 young girls. I don't know how you've even got time for this, to be honest. So when did you first become interested in the sort of concepts of cybersecurity? At what point did you first get exposed to those kinds of problems?
Sure. So my general area is data science. Okay, I have worked on communication of data, networking of data, security of data. Those are all, I wouldn't say completely independent dimensions of the puzzle. So it's all about, making things center that data and making them as simple as possible. So my specific interest in the security dimension of data came about when I was an assistant professor, like early, I would say between 2006 and 2009. It was an amazing problem. It was a mind-provoking problem. One of the things that I particularly got interested in was the culture in security is typically, because of the width of the attack surface, there were, very minimal amount of unifying approaches. This is unlike different areas of science. For example, in data communication, there's a well understood model and you keep building on it. And the problems are, easily, clearly defined in a mathematical framework. It wasn't the case in security because the one, I don't want to call it disadvantage. Let me say one thing that makes security rich is, the model is dictated by the attacker rather than the nature, right? This is kind of a unique feature of security. And when it's dictated by an attacker, it's like an attacker's imagination, which is very broad. And it's not like you can say, hey, I'm going to have the same behavior from today to tomorrow to the next day. There's lack of stationarity in that regard, which is kind of the contributing factor to perhaps the lack of unification of global approaches. Rather, it's been more like a cat and mouse game. Hey, there's this kind of attack. How do we address it? Defense, attack, defense, attack. So it's been that way. I mean, try to find a way to unify and come up with some unification, as much as I can. And I felt like that could be done, not fully, but to some extent when you focus on data itself, rather than the big castle around your networks and everything. So, it was a very long answer to your simple question. I apologize for that. I don't know if I have answered it properly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, you've definitely answered it properly. And I know what you mean about it's no 2 days are the same, I suppose, and it's can be quite reactive as well. Cybersecurity, you're responding to what the problems are basically as and when they're created, and I guess it's kind of an endless cycle really, where you come up with solutions to defend against attackers, so they have to come up with new ways of attacking you, and one kind of beast feeds the other, I suppose.
Right.
So I speak to quite a lot of startup founders with kind of varying backgrounds, right? So often you'll get someone who's from a sales background, for example, and so the way that they start and then grow their company is quite sales focused and cultured around that. You also get people who've been founding engineers for a lot of startups and kind of build that way. It's not often I speak to someone who has such a highly academic background, having been professors and stuff like that. So do you think that kind of background has helped you in this particular venture? Does it give you any different kind of skill set or approach that helps you when looking at a startup challenge?
Actually, that's a great question. I mean, part of the reason why you may not have seen it more common is because, academic way of thinking is not necessarily in terms of fully aligned with the business and marketing, or maybe looking for that wide market kind of thinking. It's more like, hey, let me seek a difficult question, difficult problem to solve, and you feel good about yourself when you solve that difficult problem. One thing that people in academia typically miss is, okay, just because you solve a difficult problem doesn't mean that there's a need, like a customer need, true customer need for that, or the market is wide. There may be a need, but the market may be niche. So that is one thing that I think, academics trying to build or striving to build a startup should be careful about, because the customer need is very different. And it doesn't, like, being innovative doesn't mean that you're solving a core problem, addressing a specific customer need. So that may be the reason why you haven't seen a wide variety of academics in the field. So I, having experience from other startups and talking to as many people as I can before getting into it, I basically surrounded myself with people who understand the business side of things or have experience in those dimensions, which helped me a lot. I also view myself as an engineer as much as an academician. So, you have to, I didn't know anything about business, but, I didn't pretend like I know something about business. So you have to find that power. You need a lot of different strengths, right? Not just, technical or business. Like, you need marketing, you need people thinking in different ways. So you have to find the balance in that. You have to acknowledge your strengths and, also acknowledge weaknesses as much as you acknowledge your strengths. So that's the way to go. And make sure that you address a core customer problem before anything. I mean, just to put it out there, I mean, it doesn't have to be innovative whatsoever. If you're simplifying the life of a group of people, can be consumers, it can be business people, then you probably have a good business idea there. It doesn't have to be innovative.
Good point. Yeah, people like an easy life at the end of the day. So that's it's a powerful pursuit.
Lazy by nature.
Indeed, yeah. Work smarter, not harder, basically.
Sure.
So you mentioned a couple of times there Ohio State University, and I know that relationship between them and Datanchor, sort of through yourself working, you've got a foot in each camp, really. How kind of has that relationship helped to impact the success of your company? What does that kind of relationship provide to you in terms of benefits?
Sure. I mean, at the beginning, so one thing is skills, right? I mean, being near a source or an attraction for high-level skills, people that are highly skilled is very important and very fruitful. So I had, for example, my co-founder was a former graduate student of mine. Like it's super smart, extremely skillful person. Our first engineers were also either my former students or I had the reach to them and had conversations with them because we live in an academic environment. So that's first and foremost the point of I would say advantage and richness here. But beyond that, I mean, once we have the IP, we OSU got a percentage of the organization in terms of equity, and we have basically had an arrangement where we are currently completely independent. But again, having said that, there's definitely a great advantage of being in an environment where especially young people come in and they're excited, they have high energy, and you have access to speaking to them and working together with them. That's the best part of it.
Cool. Yeah, perfect. No, it's really really interesting sort of source of talent as well. And I'm surprised not more companies do that, I suppose. But I suppose with your background, you're in quite a unique position to sort of take advantage of that huge benefit, really, especially kind of how difficult it is to find those kind of skills. So I guess kind of continuing the thread of, relationships that benefit the business and its success. Something that I'm seeing quite a lot as well at the moment, especially in the security space, is earlier stage companies moving into more of a sort of channel partnerships and alliances model in how they go to market. I know that you have quite a strong partnerships network as well. So how has sort of working with partners helped you to be successful and kind of grow the business?
Oh, that's our core go-to-market model, actually. We work with partners. It definitely channel partners like reseller, MSP, MSSP partnerships, but also technology partnerships, because like things are typically, at least the way we do things at Datanchor, very complementary to other technologies. So we also benefit from technology partnerships as well. It is great. I mean, one of the things that you should note about, as you said, cybersecurity is that it's very difficult to sell security. Okay, it is not a sexy proposition to say, yeah, I'm gonna enhance your security. Okay, so it has to come, again, going back to, has to come from a specific customer need. What can it be? For example, compliance is a good example. So because this security is becoming a national security issue, governments are pushing for compliance requirements to do business in the first place. So it's a core need for a business. So compliance is highly tied to security. And, that's a business need. Another business need is, organizations want to obtain cyber insurance, right? But because, again, of what's going on in the world, it's becoming more and more difficult to even obtain a policy, let alone obtaining an expensive policy, right? So, where I'm trying to tie this to your original question is the best people that know the needs of the customers is those partners. So the channel partners say, oh, yeah, I exactly know where you would add value to this specific customer because they have been looking for something in your field. So it helps a lot. And the reason maybe it's more common than not in the field of security is you need that business a problem to sell, which is in contrast to selling security, more secure data, more secure network, which is more tough.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. It's a really good point. Yeah, and it's you're right. It's not always a sexy proposition, and often you're kind of. I think the interesting thing about security, which I've said before, is that it's a lot of evangelizing the market. So you're often having to educate around a specific threat or a specific law that someone doesn't even necessarily know about before you then go and sell. So you kind of double the work, I suppose. So that kind of leads me on actually to a question I was interested in asking. You mentioned core customer problems that you're having to sell against. What is the kind of most common customer problem that your product specifically is solving? And as you kind of said at the start, you like to make simple solutions to difficult problems. So how is it that you're kind of solving that problem?
Sure. Let me give an example. I mean, continuing on the compliance perspective, compliance is something that we really make easy. So as an example, for example, NIST is something that an organization here which is like a follow-up version of NIST is called CMMC. Those are two requirements that organizations here need to comply with in order to make contracts with the Department of Defense or in general with the government. So, one thing that we do at Anchor is, for example, because we make security data-centric, like core make data protect itself, it is so much easier compared to building a big perimeter or a castle around your network, okay? Because if you do the latter, the attack surface grows and it's a matter of time that an attacker can access your data. But if you start at the data, now you don't need a castle to keep it inside. It can travel and it remains secure. And it's so much easier. If you do it right, so much easier and fully transparent. So that's one dimension that we make it easy for the customers, compliance, right? But in general, there's so much application if you think about it. Think of making data its own secure boundary. So, it travels with data, for example, collaboration. Many of our customers want to collaborate with others, but they're reluctant because there's no controls. When you send your files to your collaborator, they own it, not just access it, but they own it. So you have to now make NDAs, all kinds of contracts. So we are asking, hey, wouldn't it be nice that you control even when they're, consuming it? Like another example is that the friction point that our customers see is employee turnover. So when we leave, we all do this, by the way. When we leave an organization, we take data with us. We take our former projects, we save it to our personal, folders, USB, removable stick. We keep it with us and we think that it's our right. But, it's in most situations, it's a very, especially in the case of small to mid-sized businesses, it's like an existential issue. So it would be nice to eliminate that. Without adding friction to the workflows, without adding, lack of transparency to the user workflows. So those are some of the things that we can help with, but you have to focus because you're a startup. So we focus on a few problems around making security an integral part of data.
Cool. Yeah, perfect. Yeah. So you mentioned as a startup, you're focusing on a few things. Have you got have you got an image in your mind of kind of in 10 years, 15 years, this is how here we want to sort of where we want to be, sorry, or are you kind of taking it one day as it comes at the moment?
No, I mean, we have ambitious long-term actually goals and vision. So, you know, I mean, again, I know I'm giving long answers to your easier questions, but if you just take a step back and if you look at like the information revolution, what we have done is the first 50, 75 years until the computer power catches up with that was like being able to communicate and store data in an error-free fashion. And then like early 1990s, we built the internet and made it wider. So which means now data is accessible anywhere, right? And in the first part of 2000s, we made it, we indexed it. Now it's accessible within the matter of milliseconds, right? And now that it's accessible and so abundant, the last decade has been about utilizing it. Like machine learning is about why machine learning has been around for 50, 60 years, why it has gained, that AI gained its popularity in the last 10 years is because of the abundance and ease of access to data, right? Because it's abundant and now we have enough data to train algorithms that we need for that. We believe the next 10 years is going to be control because now it's so abundant. Businesses start to see major problems. Why? Because now my data, it is safe to assume that my data is everywhere, right? I mean, just because it's in your castle, in your network, doesn't mean that you have ownership of it. It's anywhere. So now the assumption we should start with is my data, people universally has access to my data. And yet the question is, do I still have control of it? Can I, for example, revoke access? That's what I mean. You're in Europe. GDPR is about having control, about being able to forget or take away control as you wish as the owner of data. I believe the next decade is going to be about that. Without taking the utility away, can we add the control to the data? And our vision as an organization is in the next 10 years to be the leader of being able to control data, no matter where it's accessed. It can be accessed by my collaborators, by me, by my employees, but I still retain control of it.
Right, fantastic. So leading the forefront in putting the genie back into the bottle, basically.
Yes, carefully putting back the genie in the bottle without taking away any of its utility.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. Well, I appreciate we're kind of getting to the end of the time here, Emre. I just kind of wanted to finish with one final question. And it's kind of designed really to uncover if there's any lessons you've learned in the past sort of 4 years to pass along to any of our listeners. So if you were able to go back 4 years to sort of the first day that you started Anchor, is there anything that you would change about how you kind of approached that journey?
Yes. So right. I mean, personally, the answer is yes. So sometimes you need to pivot quickly, right? But there's also a trade-off between pivoting quickly and patience, because I mean, again, that's kind of being an academic. The process of, for example, working with somebody is a long-term thing, right? I mean, you have to understand, train, work together, and then they align with you. But the time scales in business is much shorter. So in situations where you have sometimes, I mean, your gut feeling that something is not going to work, maybe it's better to act quicker on that gut feeling as opposed to, okay, to be fair, I want to be a little more patient on this. So pivoting quicker but carefully is, I'm not saying, okay, keep changing your strategy from one day to another. Strategies and principles are longer term, but ideas or execution methods on them can be shorter term, and act quicker, act fast, because the time scales are much shorter in business, especially in startups. So
Cool.
that's the thing that I would change.
Nice. A powerful message, definitely, for a lot of the people that listen here. And I think that tops off a lot of really useful lessons and advice from you today, Emre. I've really enjoyed that conversation. So thank you so much for the time and being on here. And hopefully it won't be the last time.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And it was a pleasure being here. Thanks.
Excellent. Fantastic. Well, thanks to Emre Koksal. And for those of you at home, tune in next time to Growing Tech Fast.